luckily you're comfortable inside where you're working.
Yeah. So what about the Lancaster Summer School last week? I think you concluded the summer school last week.
Yes,
right?
yeah, we concluded it. So it was 2 weeks ago because last week we
2
had
weeks ago, yes.
CL, and yeah, it was really good. We had lots of participants from all over the world. So as usual, it's always good to to get to know people from different parts of the world, to share ideas and resources. So it's a very good opportunity to teach people from different contexts and backgrounds, to get ideas from them, to test out different tools. So yeah. And how were the previous sessions of this summer school?
Oh, it's good. People seem to enjoy the sessions as well as all the speakers. Yeah, so it went quite smoothly.
Yes.
And this session will be smooth, I think. Okay, with you.
Sorry?
I think this session will be smooth.
I hope so, yes. It should. I was wondering whether you have well, I'm going to ask the audience anyway, but I was wondering whether you have an idea of the type of audience that we have. Is it mainly language teachers, or do we have a mix of people with different background experience, researchers, university?
Well, the background of the participants vary. Some are language teachers, many are students, some are lecturers. But this course aim at beginning corpus linguist. It even assumes zero knowledge on corpus linguistics.
Of course.
And that's why we have the first 4 sessions, because we teach participants about the basic corpus linguistics, how to design research question, which is based on corpus phenomena, and then how to do concordance, frequency list, collocation, and how to query in the CKP web.
Of course. Well, great. This is the best audience then.
All the participants, they can use CKP web shared account. So if you want to demonstrate something using CKP web, they already have the account, so no worries.
That's good.
Perfect. Okay, Rafa, can we start now?
Absolutely, yes, please.
Okay, so I will hand over the session to the moderators.
Thanks.
All right, check. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Audible. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 5, which is our final in Deep Scoring 2023. My name is Rosana Argandari with my partner, Cindy Nurrohmah, and we will be your host for today's session. We thank you for your enthusiasm and patience from day 1 to today. In day 1, we have learned how to devise a corpus-based research questions. We have also been introduced to a number of office query systems by Dr. Robilo from Aston University, United Kingdom. In day 2, we have learned how to write various queries in CKP web with Dr. Andres Agomide from Universidade de Coimbra, Portugal. And Dr. Peter Coswhite was with us on the 3rd day with concurrences and frequency list sessions. And yesterday, we had an engaging sessions on collocations with Dr. Carolina Denistia, PhD.
Today, we will have 3 sessions. First, we will listen to the Diponegoro special lecture from Dr. Raffaella Bottini, Lancaster University from UK, and the theme of her talk is lexical complexity in corpus research. Second, we will have an engagement session, and the schooling will be concluded by a closing remarks from Dr. Oktipa Harichandra as the head of English Department, Diponegoro University. And now let's start our first session. Let me say hello again to our keynote speaker, Dr. Raffaella Bottini. Hello, doctor. Are you ready to share your knowledge with us today?
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thanks so much for inviting me.
All right, great. But now, before that, can we all take picture together with our esteemed keynote speaker? So for dear participant, we please you to open your camera. Right, please. And we are waiting for some people to open their camera. All right, I think we can start now. So please give your nice smile, everyone. And let's begin with slide 1. 1, 2, 3. All right, slide 2. 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much, Cindy Nurrahma, and thank you very much, Dr. Rafaelina Butini. Before I hand over this session to you, allow me to read your CV first.
Thanks.
Please wait a moment, Dr. Rafaela Butini and participant. Okay, Dr. Raffaella Bottini is a lecturer in corpus linguistics at the Department of Linguistics and English Language and a member of the ESRC Center for Corpus Approaches to Social Science, or CASS, Lancaster University. Her research interests include corpus linguistics, teaching, testing, and language teaching. She specialized in application of corpus methods of the analysis of the lexical complexity in L2 English speech to inform language assessment. She has co-authored a book chapter on the statistics and the data visualization for the Routledge Handbook of Scientific Communications, and one on spoken learner corpora for Routledge Handbook of Corpora in English language teaching and learning. If you want to know more about her, you can consult her CV or contact her via emails. And now, I will hand over the session to Dr. Raffaella Bottini. Dr. Raffaella Bottini, over to you now.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and then I'm going to display my slides. So you should now be able to see my slides. And I have the chat box open as well, so that if you have questions throughout the presentation, I can see your comments, and hopefully I'll see them on time to answer them promptly. So, well, thanks so much, everyone, for joining this session. Thanks for the invitation. I'm really glad to be invited to well, share my research today. And so it's an honor to be part of this summer school. It's great to know that it's been successful so far, and I hope there will be other sessions at other summer schools in the future organized. So today I'm going to talk about lexical complexity in corpus research. It's my area of specialization. I work at Lancaster University as a lecturer in corpus linguistics, and I've also done my PhD at Lancaster University, specializing on lexical complexity. So I've spent quite a few years now in the UK working on this topic and on corpus linguistics methods in general. And I hope the lecture today will be interesting and useful to you. So just to give you an idea of what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to address two questions. What is linguistic complexity? And then how can we measure lexical complexity? And I'll give you some examples. I'll show you one of the tools that can be used to measure lexical complexity, but I'll also point you towards some of the other tools that are freely available and that you can explore further if you're interested in this topic. Then we'll have a look at two case studies to see how lexical complexity measures can be applied to research and to the analysis of language, and what are the actual applications and implications. So the first case study looks at lexical complexity in children's books, and the second case study looks at lexical complexity in L2 English speech. And throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask questions in the chat. As I said, I've got the chat box open on my screen so I can see your comments. And also, I will ask you to answer some questions at a certain point. So we will use Google Forms. I'll share with you a link so that you can give me some feedback throughout the lecture. And also, I will ask you some questions to know what kind of applications might be more relevant to your context and what could be useful to you so that we can personalize the talk. So let's start with, well, first of all, with some definitions. So what is linguistic complexity? So let's see if we can give a definition to this concept. Well, I'll first use a quotation from the German-American philosopher Nicholas Rescher, who defines complexity in general as a matter of the number and variety of an item's constituent elements, and of the elaborateness of their interrelational structure. So this is quite a complex definition of complexity, but actually, if we focus on it, we notice that complexity basically relates to the number of elements in a system, the variety of the elements in a system, how elaborate these elements are, and how they are interrelated, how they're linked. So, for example, the complexity of a language or of a language text is linked to the number of words that are used, so the number of elements that compose the text, the variety, so the diversity of the words, and also the relationship between these words. And I believe you've already discussed all these aspects, all these concepts with my previous colleagues, when you talked about frequency lists, concordances, and collocations. So these are all aspects that are linked together in the concept of complexity. So then we can basically think about linguistic complexity we can think about linguistic complexity as the structure of a language or of a text in terms of its vocabulary, but also in terms of its grammar, as well as the relationship between grammar and vocabulary. So when we talk about complexity in linguistics, we usually make a distinction between lexical complexity, morphological complexity, syntactic complexity, and phraseological complexity. So as the words say, lexical complexity refers to vocabulary, morphological complexity and syntactic complexity refer to grammar, and then phraseological complexity refers to lexicogrammatical relationships, phraseology, collocations, formulaicity, so concepts that you discussed during the summer schools already, I believe. And also linguistic complexity, so that the notion of complexity is one of the components of the CAF framework or CAF framework. And you might be familiar with this. This is something that is used and mentioned and studied in studies on second language acquisition and in linguistics in general. And it's basically when we analyze complexity, accuracy, and fluency, especially when we analyze learner language and the language production of learners of a second language. So in this case, today, we basically focus on complexity, but of course, when we analyze the production of a learner of English, we can analyze also the accuracy of their language, so if they make errors or not, and what type of errors, and the fluency of their production, for example, considering pauses, fillers. So these three aspects, complexity, accuracy, and fluency, are often interrelated, and research often looks at the three of them together. But as I said, today we'll focus just on complexity and specifically on lexical complexity. So I can already see a question in the chat box. Thanks so much. So yes, lexical complexity was part of my doctoral research, and still part of my research, my current research now as a lecturer. My dissertation, my thesis, is not currently available because I'm working on publications. So, but I believe towards the end of the year, some of my publications from the thesis will be available. So if you're interested in this topic, please have a look at my webpage where I update regularly my publications, or feel free to get in touch with me. So we said that today we're going to focus on lexical complexity. And so let's start with an example. So this is an example from Lytham St. Anne's News. This is a local news company which provides news across the northwest of England, close to Lancaster, where I am based. And this is a post that was taken from the official Facebook profile of this news company. And so this post reads, "Fury from local children as rope bridge is ruthlessly removed from Lowther Gardens Play Park. Oscar, 5, from Lytham, told Lytham St. Anne's News, the rope bridge was the main highlight of my visit to this park. I am deeply disappointed as its removal, and I am just praying that it's a temporary measure. This rope bridge brought so much joy to the younger community, and I know I won't be the only one upset." Oscar added, "Let's hope it will be reinstated before the summer comes to a close." So what do you think is strange in this post? I'll just give you a few seconds and you can use the chat box. So having a look at these little text, this short text, what is it that is strange in your opinion? Do we have some comments? Feel free to share your views. Interesting. So somebody is mentioning the vocabulary used by Oscar in the quotation marks. So in the direct speech that Oscar produced, somebody said, "This is not true." So it's probably, Oscar probably didn't say these words. The sentences and the vocabulary is complex, too sophisticated. Maybe ChatGPT said that. Well, that's a good guess. I'm not sure whether ChatGPT was already available when this post was uploaded. It was uploaded, as you can see from the bottom of the slides, last year, July 2022. So perhaps it could be, but definitely it's a bit suspicious, right? So let's see what the here is the actual text. Sorry, so just to have a bit of a larger print in case we want to see more, but we'll have a look at it again in the next slides. Let's have a look at some of the readers' comments that were posted below this message. So you can see here the readers of this post on Facebook and notice the discrepancy between the child's age, Oscar is 5, and its language. And the readers highlighted some features here. The reader mentioned some of the things that you also noticed, that Oscar has a wide vocabulary for a 5-year-old, very eloquent, a very wide range of vocabulary. And probably Oscar is going to take a degree next year. And perhaps Oscar is 55, not 5, or so all sorts of comments here. And I think, oh yes, there's even a funny comment that says, it is Oscar Wilde, perhaps, who's a famous English writer. So, okay, we've got some comments here that highlight this discrepancy. So let's see if we can analyze the vocabulary used by Oscar. So here is the quote. So what Oscar said. So we can analyze the complexity or richness of the vocabulary used by Oscar when he says, the rope bridge was the main highlight of my visit to the park. I'm deeply disappointed at its removal, and I'm just praying that it's a temporary measure. This rope bridge brought so much joy to the younger community, and I know I won't be the only one upset. Let's hope it will be reinstated before the summer comes to a close. So of course, we can guess that we can probably imagine that this was perhaps written by the journalist and not really by Oscar. But how can we prove it? Well, as I said, we can analyze the complexity or richness of Oscar's language. So first, we can gray out all the repetitions in these utterance. So if we exclude the repetitions in gray and we just focus on the unique words in black, we can see the range of vocabulary produced, how diverse the Oscar's vocabulary is. And this is called lexical diversity. So the range of vocabulary produced. If we dig deeper, we can analyze some other features of Oscar's vocabulary. So for example, here in blue, you can see infrequent words in a reference corpus. And these are words that can be used to measure Oscar's lexical sophistication. So if we use a reference corpus, for example, in this case, the Spoken BNC 2014, which contains spoken language produced by L1 speakers of English in the UK, we can basically compare the language used by Oscar and the language used by speakers of English as a first language. In this case, we're using the BNC, the British National Corpus. So this large corpus contains language produced in the UK specifically, so in the British context. We can compare the vocabulary and we can highlight in blue the words that are infrequent in the reference corpus. And in this way, we can see how many and what type of infrequent words Oscar uses, so we can measure the sophistication, the lexical sophistication of his language. We can also make a further distinction, and we can actually separate the content words on the left. So these are the lexical and content words, such as nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs, from grammatical words. So function words, words that we use to link our content words. So in this case, on the right, we have articles, auxiliaries, prepositions, and conjunctions. So when we divide the vocabulary into these two groups, we can see the proportion of content words and grammatical words. And this is useful because usually content words are the words that convey the meaning. So they are words that convey the information. And therefore, making this distinction, we can analyze the lexical density of a text, how dense in terms of information the text is. So using this example, we've already introduced three key concepts for studying lexical complexity. So what is lexical complexity? Well, lexical complexity, which is also called lexical richness, refers to a structural dimension of a text, and it refers to the vocabulary features of a text that are determined by linguistic rules, by speakers' choices, language users' choices, and also by the communicative context, whether we are in a more formal or informal context, whether we are producing spoken language, essays, a newspaper article. So the lexical choices are also determined by the text type, by the register and the genre. And lexical complexity is composed of three main parts, so three main dimensions: lexical diversity, sophistication, and density. And we've seen in Oscar's example what it means to analyze the diversity of vocabulary, which is the range of different words, the sophistication of the vocabulary, so the advanced words that, for example, Oscar used, and the density of Oscar's vocabulary, so the proportion between content and function words. So these are the three main components of lexical complexity. And actually, some of the research has also identified subcomponents and subdimensions. So, for example, lexical sophistication, there is a lot of research on lexical sophistication that has highlighted subdimensions. So not just the use of advanced words, but for example, the use of abstract words and unfamiliar words and so on. But I'll say more about this later. So now, based on these 3 dimensions, we can then define a complex text. A complex text is a text where we have a wide variety of vocabulary and a large number of advanced vocabulary. And I'll define advanced in a more specific way later. So when is lexical complexity useful? Why? Well, what are the applications of these measures? Well, we can measure lexical complexity and specifically density, diversity, and sophistication in a wide range of fields and disciplines. So, for example, we can use lexical complexity measures in research on language acquisition, in research on bilingualism, multilingualism, when we want to see the vocabulary production, for example, across different languages and at different proficiency levels. We can use lexical complexity measures in language tests when we examine and when we assess our learners' vocabulary use. We can see, for example, whether they use vocabulary typical of the proficiency level that they are supposed to be at. We can use lexical complexity measures to study different language impairment conditions, or such as aphasia, or for example, the language produced by autistic people or people with different language impairments. We can use lexical complexity to analyze texts in terms of their stylistical features. For example, we can study literary texts, so different examples from literature comparing writers, but also stylistics in terms of current writers, and thinking, for example, about journalists or politicians analyzing their speeches, for example. And finally, we can use lexical complexity for authorship attribution when we want to study and when we want to identify the author of a specific text. For example, in forensic linguistics, which is a type of linguistic research that focuses on language used in legal context, but also to identify perhaps criminal offenders and so on. And these are just some of the examples of applications. And I'm sure that you can also think about possible applications of these measures in your own context. And this list that you can see on this slide is not comprehensive at all. So we can actually add some other examples. And I can see that some of you have already suggested some other applications, which are great. So I can see a comment that suggests applying these measures to detect the originality of texts produced and to compare student texts with texts produced by artificial intelligence, such as ChatGPT. And this is a very good idea. And I'm not aware of any study that has applied these measures in this context yet. So I think this is a very good idea for a future research project, for example. Yes, and then somebody else in the chat has mentioned grammatical complexity measures. Absolutely. So grammatical complexity, so in